Amy Swear with the Heritage Foundation, now joining us here on Montana Talks. Amy, great to have you back on the show. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me again.
So here we go again. They're already pushing their gun control agenda, but yet it seems like they never want to crack down on the actual criminals who might use firearms to commit crimes.
Yeah, and that really is the main problem with this background check bill is that it doesn't address any of the ways in which we know criminals access their guns. So criminals, generally speaking, are not going to these legal sorts of places like federally licensed dealers or to individuals who they know are going to comply with background checks. They're already avoiding those avenues and using other means. So cracking down on law-abiding citizens who are going to comply with this law is not actually addressing the ways in which people who are going to break the law get their guns.
So the Politico has this headline: House passes most sweeping gun control legislation in decades. How would you describe the gun control bill? Not only I think at least one bill passed the U.S. House yesterday, but they've got other proposals that they're pushing now also.
Sure. So as you mentioned, there was a bill that passed the House yesterday, the Universal Background Checks bill. That bill is almost certainly not going to even get a hearing in the House, in the Senate, much less get passed. And even if it did, the president would almost certainly veto it. But there have been a number of other proposals introduced. Senator Feinstein introduced a new version of her, quote, assault weapons ban that would essentially prohibit people from purchasing in the future a large number of guns that are used right now by tens of thousands of Americans tens of millions even of Americans that are used for law-abiding purposes, such as AR-15s and anything with a, quote, high-capacity magazine. There have been other measures introduced that would just attack magazines with a capacity of over 10 rounds. As well as a number of other measures by various lawmakers that are similar in nature, but really those have been the big pushes have been for assault weapons bans, high-capacity magazine bans, and universal background checks.
And, it was interesting, too, because yesterday, I think a couple of days ago, we heard from our own congressman about some of the gun control bills, and a point that he made, here in Montana, we got a lot of farmers and ranchers. We got people who live out in rural environments. Well, first off, the Second Amendment applies to all of us, but in particular, okay, let's say you're going hunting with one of your hunting buddies, and your rifle gets a jam, whatever. So your buddy says, "Here, use my rifle." He's saying that under some of these gun control proposals, that you could actually be charged for that. That it'd be against the law. That's crazy.
Absolutely, and these were some of the things that Republicans and other Second Amendment advocates had pointed out about the bill and offered amendments to try to fix some of these very serious problems, and they were outright rejected. So we offered ways in which we could fix some of these problems, because you're right, under the bill, as it is now, if you were to, say, lend a hunting rifle to a buddy, or if you have ranch hands or farm hands who borrow rifles for any sort of period of time, under the law as it's written, in order to transfer that firearm, you would have to go down to a federally licensed dealer, go through a background check, pay the fees to this for-profit business, wait up to 3 days for that background check, and only then could you transfer it. And then to get the rifle back, you'd have to go back down and do the whole process again. And so they'll argue, oh, well, no one's actually going to be prosecuted for that. But the thing is, if you understand that it is absurd to prosecute people for those transfers, why would you not accept them in the first place? And so it's just a big mess in that regard.
Well, and I'd imagine it could also raise some complications. I think a lot of us back here in Montana are kind of like me. I mean, I've got some friends, especially some of my veteran friends, that the moment they get their tax refund, they're heading to go buy a new gun. You know what I mean? And so they are gun nuts. They love. Whereas I'm the type, like, I got a lot of hand-me-downs, right? Because I'm kind of cheap. So I've got a lot. But a lot of us, you get them from they get passed down the family through generations. Maybe they get restored, refurbished, etc. And oftentimes these types of laws can actually impede those efforts just to simply pass guns down through the generations.
Yeah, and where that would come into play here is, so if you have a family member, an immediate family member, and you wanted to gift it to them, so permanently and for free, you could do that without a background check. But let's say you have a really expensive antique hunting rifle, or something that costs thousands of dollars, and you had a son or a nephew who wanted to reimburse you for part of that cost. In order to even reimburse you a single dollar for it, it is now no longer a gift, and you'd have to go down to a licensed dealer for that in a way that you wouldn't have to if he didn't pay you that dollar. And so there are just a lot of weird little loopholes here that really don't make a whole lot of sense when you really think about them.
Well, yeah, and I know one of the points that you make a good argument for, and that others, NRA and others are saying, hey, look, they need to actually enforce the laws that are on the books. In addition to enforcing the laws that are on the book, what else can they also be doing to actually crack down on actual criminals who are already violating gun laws instead of just trying to go after the rest of the innocent people here in this country?
Well, again, one of the things that they can do is start prosecuting people for intentionally committing straw purchases. That is, knowingly submitting false information, buying handguns, rifles for people who are prohibited by law from doing so. But there are other ways in which, if you are going to go after certain individuals who, let's say, might be in the middle of a mental health crisis, who maybe haven't been formally committed yet, there are ways of going after specific individuals and utilizing due process, utilizing mental health frameworks that are already in place, without necessarily imposing broad frameworks and broad gun control measures on just everybody in this sort of sweeping way. And so even if people are going to go the gun control route, the way to do it is to go after specific individuals who are showing themselves by their actions to be a danger to themselves or others, and not to just presume that everybody is a danger to themselves or others and say, well, this applies to everybody now, but to really take a more controlled, individualized route while still respecting due process.
Well, and I threw this question out to Rachel Sutherland on Fox News Radio earlier, and which is kind of, hey, can we trust the Trump administration to veto any of these efforts? Because, of course, they did push forward on a bump stock ban, and I understand that got a hearing recently in federal court. So where will the Trump administration fall on these measures?
Well, it's hard to tell, because Trump has at certain points tweeted things that may indicate he would be okay with universal background checks, but I think at other points he has kind of wavered back and forth. I think ultimately it's not even going to get to that point, but if it does, I think this bill has so many problems with it that are, these are just fundamental flaws, that even if someone is pro-universal background checks, there are just too many problems with this bill to make someone want to advocate for it. So I think ultimately, if it came down to it, the president would veto this bill just based on all of the other problems that exist with it.
All right, Amy Swearer with the Heritage Foundation. Thanks for keeping a close eye on these Second Amendment issues for us. It's one of our biggest topics to talk about back here in Montana, because we love our Second Amendment rights and we love the outdoors. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.